This video focuses on the book Nowhere on Earth by Nick Lake. It's a fantasy book aimed at readers around the ages of 13 and upwards. The book focuses on survival in harsh conditions and the protagonist overcoming the main problems of her past. Nowhere on Earth was a CILIP Carnegie Shortlist medal winner in 2020 and consists of 352 pages in its paperback form. So I'll begin the review by outlining the setting of the beginning of the book. So we meet the protagonist Emily, who lives in a remote town in rural Alaska after moving from Minnesota with her parents. The town is described as an isolated area that is only accessible by scheduled plane that takes off once per week. With Emily is a young boy who is implied to be Emily's younger brother, Aidan. It isn't specifically mentioned until later in the book, but it turns out that Aidan isn't who we think he is. Aidan is an alien that hides in the form of a human body, and Emily adopts Aidan with the facade that he's her younger brother. Upon visiting town, they notice that government agents, who are referred to in the book as the Men in Black or the Men in White later in the forest, are following them around town and even paid a visit to their house one day. Emily begins to grow suspicious that the Men in Black know that Aidan isn't human. Therefore, her plan is to run away from home, hoping to evade the agent. They become stowaways on a plane of the bush pilot, Bob Simpson, who is headed for Anchorage. Little did they know, however, that the plane was sabotaged and crash-landed in a national forest deep in the Alaskan wilds. So the trio are forced to keep moving to avoid confronting the Men in White, while being cautious not to succumb to the freezing temperatures of Alaska. Along the way, we learn more of our three main characters, and also characters secondary who have influenced Emily, our protagonist. We learned that Emily didn't just run away to protect Aidan, but to also run away from her problems at home, which is what we were first led to believe before we learnt that Aidan was an alien. We learn that Aidan has the power to manipulate minds of people and animals, which is how he managed to convince Emily's parents that he was their child. An interesting character we learn quite a bit about in the book is Emily's father, who is quite privy to survivalist knowledge. When different confrontations come to light in the book, Emily is able to remember what her father taught her and quickly adapts to save their lives in many situations. Other memorable characters throughout the book include characters like Brad and Rachel, which contribute to Emily's character as a teenager who is struggling with emotions guiding her decisions. Brad is portrayed in a way which makes the reader think very little of him and how vile and repugnant some of the things he says and does actually are, whereas Rachel is seen as an enabler of Brad and his actions, which is a reminder of how toxic some peers at school actually can be. Moving on to the themes, I started by highlighting the most evident show of emotion, which is familial love. Emily is content to have a sibling in Aidan and actually begins to feel somewhat jealous of how her parents react to him. Emily never really wanted to be an only child, and having Aidan there made her feel somewhat more fulfilled. This also connects to the theme of companionship and Emily's need to protect Aidan from the world he knows little of. An overarching theme throughout the book is Emily's feelings of loneliness and dread. We find Emily constantly slipping off into her memory, even in life-threatening situations. She even wonders herself if reliving the past will affect her judgment in the present. Consequence is another recurring theme in the story, as Emily finds herself explaining her reasoning for her action of revenge against Brad and the school. We found out that she burnt down the school's locker room by accident in response to Brad's inappropriate behaviour. Another surface theme in the book is good and evil. Emily begins to wonder if Aidan's power to alter minds is a good thing after witnessing him controlling the squirrel to become easy prey to the bear in chapter 24. She thinks back to giving Aidan permission to fill her parents' minds with memories of him and almost regrets asking him to use his power so willingly. When considering ways that the content of the book will synergize with other subjects, straight away I thought of PSHE. I personally felt appalled to learn that Brad had taken advantage of Emily minding her own business. We learnt that Emily, numerous times throughout her high school experience, was harassed and even groped by Brad, which began to build on her trauma. When Emily goes to confess what Brad did, Rachel and the other cheerleaders thought nothing of it, and even told her that because she was a cheerleader and Brad was a football player, that it just naturally came with the territory. I find this line of thinking completely unacceptable, and think it's important to teach that this behaviour shouldn't be encouraged by peers. Loneliness is also a significant problem that affects young minds in real life. Emily's lack of people to confide in ultimately leads her down this path to do devastating damage, accidentally or not. It's important to teach pupils that they always have someone to talk to in school if they feel that parents or friends just aren't an option. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.